and 16 is where we're at. Isaiah 15 and 16. Let me get my clicker. Let's see here. So we already have the outline given to us, but it's always good to just have it in the back of our mind. We are in this section that emphasizes prophecy, specifically wrath and judgment and punishment on all these different nations. He started with the people of God first, Israel and Judah, and a lot to Judah. But he is also going to talk about punishment that's coming to all these foreign nations. This is where we're at in this section, chapters 13 through 23. We're really going all the way to 35, but naming specifically all these nations in this section that we're in. And then he'll get into this historical bridge that reads like a narrative in chapters 36 to 39. And then the rest of the book will talk heavily about the Messiah to come. But we do have throughout this first section messianic prophecies, so just keep that in mind. Isaiah chapter 15, there is this proclamation against Moab, prophecy against Moab. You see there, verse 1, the burden against Moab. We talked about that word last time. Burden, maybe yours says oracle, or something to that effect. If you were to take it literally, it's like a load that you wear or have on you, and you have to carry it. But it's used in a way where it's talking about the word that has come from God. It's weighing heavy on Isaiah, and he's having to give it to Moab. It has that connotation. The burden against Moab. Because in the night Ar of Moab is laid waste and destroyed, because in the night Ker of Moab is laid waste and destroyed. He has gone up to the temple of Dibon, to the high places to weep. Moab will wail over Nebo and over Medeba. And this is the way he talks. And he will give all these different names. 17 names are given. There are 17 cities or places in Moab, even though it's pretty small. I think I have a map here. Right here is Moab. A little small section right there, but there's a number of cities, number of towns and villages, and a lot of people that live there. And Isaiah, who is right across on the southern part of Israel, namely Judah, he is talking to them. And who would read it first is actually Judah, and then Israel, and maybe Moab eventually. But God has, in his own way, already given them a chance to make it right. They've gone a long time with not doing what is right, and Isaiah is now declaring punishment on all of these cities that are in here. Moab is a product of Lot, Lot's daughter getting his father drunk and being with him, or daughters. Lot, of course, at one time lived in Sodom and Gomorrah, and the Moabite people have come from this background. They became very wicked. In Judges chapter 3, they are actually one of the ones who oppress Israel, and so God had to deliver them from them. Numbers 22, you may remember Balak, the king of Moab, sending Balaam to curse Israel. Of course, Balaam would not do it, but that did not stop him from trying to find a way to indirectly find Israel wrong before God. And so he devised this plan where the women would go and seduce Israel. The women of Moab would go seduce them, and they would do atrocities with them. And then God would have to show his justice to the people of God. That did not mean that he did not see what Balaam did, what Balak did, what the Moabites did. He kept this in mind. So they've always been like this thorn in the flesh when it comes to the people of God. And the ones reading this first are Judah. And this would give them some ease of mind that their enemy is going to find justice. This is not to create some kind of revenge in their heart, but it does show that God is a God of true justice. He doesn't let things slide. He doesn't forget about things, and he does demand justice. Now, we know from in the letter of Acts that God did say in Acts 17 that, God winked at ignorance, but wants all men to repent, and that is true. That does not mean that in the Old Testament, God overlooked all ignorance to the point where he did not seek justice for these people. They did have some understanding from God that they were without, but perhaps it was more of a longer time of patience. But whatever the case was, God did punish them. All these surrounding people, and even outside of this map, Isaiah is going to talk about all these nations that will meet the punishment of God at some point. And so let's keep a balanced mind here. It did not mean that God just let all the Gentile nations do whatever they want and they never got punishment whatsoever. That is not the case. Moab also worshipped a false god, Chemosh or Chemosh, however you want to pronounce that. It is the god of war. And that's important to know because they serve a God that supposedly will help them in times of war, but what they're going to find is they're going to be destroyed anyway because the true God is the true God of war, and he's going to bring it to their doorsteps. In chapter 15, verses 1 through 9, he really gives the judgment, but I want you to notice, we don't have time to go through every single little detail, but look at verse 5. I think it's important to raise this point. My heart will cry out for Moab. My heart will cry out for Moab. His fugitives shall flee to Zoar like a 3-year-old heifer, for by the ascent of Lahith they will go up with weeping, for in the way of Horonaim or Horonaim they will raise up a cry of destruction. My heart will cry out for Moab. God, through Isaiah, showing really the emotional state of having to do this. And we could have a safe conclusion that this is the same attitude and spirit of Isaiah himself, crying out for Moab. His heart is heavy and it hurts for even having to do this. They are in some way distant relatives, and they are souls. Isaiah does not want them to die, but he understands this has to happen. God is even said in the New Testament that he wants all to be saved and come to repentance. That does not mean that all will come and be saved and come to repentance. But God's attitude is he wants all to be saved. God has allowed Moab time to get right for many, many, many years, and they have not. And so God has to at some point enact his justice. Just like in our time, he wants all people to be saved. Not all people will, and he's given time for people to get right. But somewhere down the line, God has to bring about his justice. So we see the way God is now is very similar to how he operated back then. His character has not changed. God is not somehow just only wrath in the Old Testament and then just love in the New Testament. That would be a mistake to come to the scriptures that way. Actually, he is love and wrath in the Old Testament and love and wrath in the New Testament. It's just at different points of time, when is he going to bring about his wrath? That's where the Bible teaches us. It tells us when that's going to happen. And he goes on to give basically just the same lesson throughout this small chapter, listing all these cities, how all of them are going to meet destruction, giving it in figurative language and things like that. We come to chapter 16, and we have really Moab's hope. This is the way the prophets would operate. They would give a declaration of punishment, but here is a ray of hope. He did this for Judah and Israel as well. So here's destruction coming upon you, but there's a ray of hope in the future, which is the Messiah. And Moab, they are going to be destroyed, but there is a ray of hope for them. There it says, send the lamb to the ruler of the land from Selah to the wilderness, to the mount of the daughter of Zion, where it shall be as a wandering bird thrown out of the nest, so shall be the daughters of Moab at the fords of the Arnon, talking about that river. The fords, the waterfalls, or something to that effect. Take counsel, execute judgment, make your shadow like the night in the middle of the day. Hide the outcast, do not betray him who escapes. Let my outcast dwell with you, O Moab. Be a shelter to them from the face of the spoiler, for the extortioner is at end, devastation ceases. The oppressors are consumed out of the land. The one who will sit in mercy, the throne will be established. The one who will sit on it in truth in the tabernacle of David, judging and seeking justice and hastening righteousness. So basically saying there is a time where this one is coming, and they need to be ready. They need to be ready to help. Now, from this standpoint, in this time of Isaiah, it's too late for Moab. The people that are living there, they will meet destruction. But the remnant of whoever's left, be ready for this coming one, because Jesus is coming for all these nations, really. This is going to be the big point. Judgment and punishment for all these nations. But for each one, just know there is coming one in the distant future who will bring about salvation to all the nations. And we know from the Babylonian captivity and the Assyrian captivity, they were scattered throughout all the lands, the people of God. And when the Messiah comes, all nations are going to come together, so to speak, talking about the Jews in Acts chapter 2 on the day of Pentecost. And so Isaiah is kind of bringing all these things together. Now I'm going to hit verse 6 and following, and then I'll open it up for some discussion or questions that you've had along the way. Look at verse 6. We have heard of the pride of Moab. He is very proud of his haughtiness and his pride and his wrath. But his lies shall not be so. Therefore Moab shall wail for Moab. Everyone shall wail. For the foundations of Kir, Hareseth, you shall mourn. Surely they are stricken. Then he goes on to talk about different places. But here is the heart of the problem. It's their pride, emphasized by the repetition of the words and synonymous terms put together to really show this is why you are going to fall, because of your pride. Pride is the sin of the heart, and it is manifested in our living, even in our worship. It can affect every area of life, and it has affected Moab. The reason that they have gave Israel and Judah such a hard time through the years, it's because of their pride. We are better than them. There's always the thought from those who give Israel and Judah a hard time. It is no different for Moab. All right, I'm going to stop for a moment to take any questions or comments. I know that was a lot, but now you got the background. Yeah. What verse is that? We have heard of the pride of Moab. He is very proud, and then yours says her. Oh, okay. I didn't catch that one. I do have my he is in italics, which quickly indicates to me that there's not a word there that's being translated. It's being supplied by the translators so that we can have a better understanding as we're reading, uh, it would say the pride of Moab is very proud. Now, we could say he or her to really fit that what is being said about is very proud is about Moab. So no matter what, it goes back to the antecedent, which fits whatever pronoun you put there. It could also be maybe there's a copy out there that has a pronoun. They're not really sure about it, or maybe it's hard to read in one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, or that the scroll of Isaiah. I'll have to look that up. But it doesn't take away from the fact that it does talk about Moab. It is an interesting point to bring up. But yeah, mine is in italics and really shows that it's not really there, but just supplied. And so it's really at the discretion of the translator. And also, Moab is a group of people. And at times, Jerusalem and Judah are talked about as a woman, her. But if we were to use the pronoun he, it wouldn't really change who we're talking about. But yeah, that's a good point. Anything else? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Going back and forth between masculine and feminine.
Oh, okay.
The noun is masculine, but pride is masculine, Moab's feminine, arrogance is feminine, pride is masculine. So it's going
Yeah.
back and forth.
So it's going he, who, he, who, he, who. Yeah. Which, by the way, are the Hebrew words. He, who, which are not, sounds weird for our English because those are English words, but pronounce it. So anyways. Yeah, and sometimes the prophets would do that. They go back and forth. Thank you for that. Which then shows the importance is not necessarily whether we should regard Moab as a he or her, because in the end it's just a people. But anything else? Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, James talks about that. Peter talks about that in the New Testament. And so pride is a sin in the New Testament. So one of the many answers to the question, why should we look at the book of Isaiah? Well, this is one of the many. Because pride was a sin back then, it's a pride now. And so we look at those who were prideful and their outcome back then, it helps us to take God seriously. So when God said, you're going down because of your pride, and then he tells us, don't be prideful, we can look back at Moab and all the examples really of all these prideful people. We can look at Moab and say, okay, God means business. He doesn't want us to be prideful. Look at those who fell into pride back then. And like you said, contrite heart, if they would have just repented. But God, who sees the future, he knows, okay, it's time. Yes, sir.
Pride is not necessarily easily recognized.
Right.
But the fruits of it.
Right. Yeah, it starts in the heart, which is the mind, and it will come out into our daily living and our worship. Wise man of God said in Proverbs 21 and verse 4, a haughty look, a proud heart, and the plowing of the wicked is sin. Wisdom from God. It is not different for us. Even though Babylon was not under Mosaic law, even though Moab wasn't under them, that law system, they were still in sin, which is another thing to think about. For the Israelites, pride was a sin, and it was because it was in their law not to be that way, and then the prophets got after them for being prideful. But then the outside nations were guilty of pride. Well, we learn from the book of Romans that there cannot be sin if there is no law. You have to have a law to have a sin. If there's no law, it stands to reason, first off, that there's no sin. If someone came in here and wanted to arrest me for wearing a suit jacket, we would be flabbergasted. Why? Because it's not a law. It's not a law for me to wear this, and we would be like, there's no law. There is no breaking of the law. there's no sin, if you will, because there's no law against it. So what this tells us is Moab, even though they were not the people of God, they still had a law to follow. And it's going to be the same thing for all these nations we're about to hit, which tells us there was a law. Now, what law was it? We can only safely conclude that it was the patriarchal law, not written down as far as we know, but passed orally through the fathers, as Hebrews 1 talks about, from Adam to Abraham to Isaac, Jacob, to all these, but also in the other nations. In Genesis chapter 11, when they all scattered because of Babylon, or excuse me, the Tower of Babel, when they all scattered and they had different languages, they still had the responsibility to go wherever they were going to go and pass on the teachings of God. That there's only one God, and this is what he wants us to do. This is how he wants us to sacrifice. But instead, they went their own way and did what they wanted. We have Moab, we have Babylon, we have Assyria, we have Egypt, we have all these people that went to different places, and they continued to sacrifice, interestingly, but they decided we're going to sacrifice how we want. Even to the point of saying we're not going to sacrifice animals, we're actually going to sacrifice children. And God says, that is not what I said, but even what you changed it to is even worse. And he told Israel, don't follow them. Anyway, so there is a law system for all these people. Even when they didn't know it or they forgot it, they still were under it. Ignorance is not bliss for them. Now again, yes, God winked at ignorance. How much did he wink and in what ways? All we have to go on is the Old Testament. More is said about Judah and Israel, more of their history, now how God worked with all the rest. We only have little glimpses. For example, Jonah was told to go to Nineveh, and we know that they repented. So we see an instance there where God sent a prophet. There are writings here. Perhaps they would get it indirectly somehow as they would get wind of God pronouncing judgment. But we should not go as far as to say, well, God winked in a way where he just gave them a pass. He did not punish them at all. That is not true. Okay, Romans 4:15 is what I was talking about. It says there, because the law brings about wrath, for where there is no law, there is no transgression. So they were all under a law. And Jesus said in Mark chapter 7, verse 21 and 22, he gives a list of sins. He says, from within, out of the heart of man proceeds, and then he gives a list of things, and one of them is pride. Pride starts in the heart, and it's an attitude that says, I'm going to do what I want because I know what's best, and this is going to have a good outcome. I already see it, and so I'm going to worship this way, and I'm going to live this way, and I'm going to think this way. And like Brother Mark said, it comes out in our fruits. Yes, sir. Go ahead, David. Oh, okay.
The spirit of pride is, I know that.
Yeah.
And all these different nations decided to worship the created instead of the creator.
Right.
And Paul in Romans 1.
Yeah, he talks about that.
The wrath of God is coming because God's invisible qualities are clear in creation. But instead, they would worship the sun, the moon, idols that they made with their own hands.
Right.
They worship the created instead of the created. So I don't know that God winked or whatever, because we see him acting in these other, judging these other civilizations in his time.
And the good thing is we don't have just that one verse in Acts 17 and just left in the dark. We have that, but then we also have the Old Testament where we can learn how God worked with different nations. Now, we don't have as much as Israel and Judah, but we have enough to show that God didn't just let it go forever. You know, he did bring punishment. Now, he did show patience and long-suffering by letting them time to get right. And actually, we see that today. I mean, how long has it been since Christ went on the cross? Well, we're year 2026. Of course, for the Dionysius who made that whole timeline, BC and AD, there's like a couple of years, that is maybe off, but and that's why Jesus is born in 4 BC, before Christ, which kind of sounds odd. But look, we're 2,000 plus years. Whatever the exact number is, we're hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years removed from the time of Jesus. And nations have had all that time to get right before him. Have there been nations who have just forgotten about Christ or not even known about him? Is that true? Up until this point? Are there nations right now who either forgot what Jesus has done or don't know it? I would say it's very slim. Right now, we're down to different peoples that are deep down in the jungle, maybe that we have not reached. Maybe some islands that are very isolated. But for the most part, nations, at least in a general sense, know about Christianity and Christ. But if there's any ignorance out there, I mean, not knowing at all, whoever they are still without excuse. Moab without excuse. People are still without excuse because God knows the heart. If a person really wants to know the truth, he will seek after it, and God will not hinder it from them. There are many areas of life where pride can take place. People can fall into pride due to their possessions. Since they own this and that, they feel like, well, they are better and no one's going to tell them what to do. Don't you know that I have accumulated all these things with all my hard work and effort? You're not going to tell me what to do. What are some other ways that we can end up either being tempted into pride or becoming prideful? Yes, sir, Jeff. Yeah.
Anytime it's about us, I don't care what the fruit of it is, drinking, whatever, doesn't matter. Anytime I'm going to do my thing, that's pride.
Yeah.
And I'm putting reliance on me.
Yeah.
And I have said, whatever, to everything else. You can argue whether I understand. The air moves around. It's here. We see it. That's why we're without excuse. This stuff doesn't just spring into existence. We understand that. The problem comes whenever we're like, you know what? I'm in.
Yeah.
Pride
So,
starts, and then we can manifest it in any area of our life as we see fit. But it's whenever we put ourselves above him.
yeah. So you said the power of my right hand or the power of your right hand, that attitude can still happen today, and it does happen. So-
Anytime there's pride,
Where did the right hand come from? If we're talking about a literal way. But, any power or strength or energy that you have comes from the Lord. Now, one might say, well, I went to school and I became a doctor and I went to school and I paid for it and I paid my dues and I studied and I did all these things and I did my internships and I have practiced with all these patients. I have built up this empire. I have done it. But see, even at that, who gave the doctor his mind? God. Who made it where the mind can work in such a way that can retain all these things? God. Who gave that doctor his body? Is God. And so for one to say, well, I have done this, well, you only have done it by the energy that God has made in your body, to the natural energy, the natural body, and the way he has formed our body to do things with our hands if one becomes a surgeon, the way our mind can multitask as it sends different electric waves between each lobe of the brain. It just goes back and forth, back and forth. We can multitask. Why? Because God has set it up that way. No matter what you say that you have done, God should have the credit for it. Other ways that we can end up is race. Since we are this race, we're more superior to others. Now, this was a problem more in the past, I know, but it can still happen with individuals. One might say, I'm this race, and even if they don't say it right out, maybe their attitude kind of reveals it. What about the body? One who works out. It's a huge thing in America. With all the supplements and nutrients that we are so easily accessible to, we can get it really easy. If we really wanted to, we could eat healthy. It's a little bit more expensive, but for those who are able to, they can build their body in such a way that it will have a good physique. But then, got to be careful. Not that that's a sin in itself. It is good to be healthy, but let it not get to your head. You know, we have to make sure we're not having that attitude. What about gender? It's a huge one in America, right? Someone raised their hand? Mark, you had your hand up? No, okay. Sorry about that. We can backtrack if you want.
Hang on. Yes, I got it.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're told to be thankful always in all things.
Yeah.
And pride.
Yeah.
We're giving God credit. Here's another verse that says, you have nothing to thank him.
Yeah.
That takes away pride with your possession.
Yeah, and bringing that up, they weren't thankful. Romans chapter 1 brings that up. For the Gentiles who needed the gospel, neither were they thankful. And you might think, well, what's the big deal? Well, it goes hand in hand with pride. Well, I have brought this, and with that attitude, you see no reason to thank God. Or thank others, even at that, who helped you get there. You know, it is good to say thank you to other people as well, but for sure, God. Thank you for that.
Within the meeting service.
Mhm.
Bringing much. Some were having them.
Yeah,
They weren't proud.
yeah,
They weren't sharing.
yeah. And one of the commands, or at least the example set by Jesus, we thank God for the bread, thank God for the fruit of the vine. Well, if in that problem they had in 1 Corinthians 11, some were not even getting it, how could they even give opportunity to give thanks? So, David, did you have something back there?
Recently,
Mm-hmm.
we're stewards. And the thing, when I say that's not stewardship.
Right.
Like, none of us sustains our life.
Mm.
None of us created us. None of us, did ourselves in our mother's womb or put our spirit within us. None of us caused the sun to rise, the moon to become, all these things. And I think when we look at creation and the miracles of God's recreation, going through the seasons, births of children and animals, it just humbles me that all God has called us to be is a good steward. Because we brought nothing into this life, we're going to take nothing out of it.
Right.
And so am I going to be a good steward? And anything good we know comes from God, the Father of lights. And so it's that, what you're saying, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. James has it, Peter has it, it's in Proverbs.
Yeah.
Again and again and again. Like in 6:8, you want to be right with God, you must walk humbly. And part of that is looking at all he has given and done that we can never do for ourselves.
Yeah, so being good stewards is very important. It goes against that. And it's so beautiful how everything is connected, right? All the positive things that need to be there. Thanksgiving to God, humble spirit, contrite heart, and good stewardship. All these things work together. And if you fail in one area, that shows that it can be like a domino effect and start affecting other areas of life. For example, pride. One who is guilty of pride isn't somehow well, it's not going to affect any other area. It's just going to be a feeling I have in my heart, and that's where it's just going to be isolated. Yeah, I know I got to work on pride, but it doesn't really affect anything else. That's actually not true. Pride, it starts in the heart, but it will, maybe faster than others, but it will eventually show in other areas. Pride says, I'm going to do what I want. Pride says, I have this from God, but I'm going to do with it what I want, not being a good steward. Pride says, well, yes, I know I sinned over here in this other area, but I am not going to repent. Don't you know who I am? Don't you know how much money I give? Don't you know what I have done in the church? Don't you know how long I've been a Christian? Don't you know who I am in society? And the list goes on. And, oh, was that the 5-minute bill when he did that? Okay, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, Proverbs 6. Yeah. 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 Proud look, lying tongue, and all that. He has a list of 6 things God hates and 7. So, yeah. Yeah, proud look. Yeah, it's like you said, bringing up the verses, Jesus and others that say pride will manifest itself in the fruits. Yeah, and that's how we'll know. And if for some reason any pride is hidden from anybody else, guess who does know? Guess who does know? God. God knows. Can't hide anything from him when it comes to the heart. Psalm 44:21, Acts 15:7, God knows the heart, which is the mind, emotional state, everything we think, everything we plan, everything we do. God knows the motive. He knows the intent of the heart. He knows the secret things of the heart, things that you would never tell anybody else. He knows. And so if you do have pride and you think that it doesn't show, just know that God knows right off. And so pride leads to condemnation. I'll end with this as the bell is being rung. Proverbs 16:18-19 says, pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Better to be of a humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. And this is exactly the problem Moab had. Thank you so much for your attention and your participation. We'll go ahead and finish right there.